Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Legally Speaking. I'm your host, Oves Anwer. There are times when even lawyers have to go beyond the law. We don't particularly enjoy it because it exposes the limits of the law and ultimately our own limitations, but it's at times necessary. The U.S. Israeli strikes on Iran, and Iran's response is one such situation. The limits of the law have been laid bare, and this isn't a conflict we can really truly understand just through a legal lens. We have to look at it historically. We have to look at it from an international relations perspective and a predictive analysis perspective as well. To do this, I'm delighted to have with me Syed Ali Zia Jaffery, who is Deputy Director of the Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research at the University of Lahore. And he's also Associate Editor of Pakistan Political. Ali, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Ali, I wanted to start off with, I had mentioned the issue of miscalculations, and that's really how you can describe, I think, this misadventure by Israel and the US. Where do you feel the US miscalculated? And the US on one side, but really Israel, I mean, this has been its reason for existence for so long. This aim at, being able to take out Iran and take out its leadership and, force regime change. How did it miscalculate so spectacularly?
Thank you very much. So there was this great Chinese war strategist Sun Tzu who famously wrote in his book Art of War, if you know your enemy, you can win 1,000 battles. So, as you said, this has been a spectacular failure on part of the U.S. and Israel in getting to know what the Islamic Republic is and what it stands for. Um, Even if you take a cursory look at the history of the Islamic Republic since 1979, you see this idea of defiance ingrained in its grand strategy. And for your viewers, I would like to suggest a very good new book by Dr. Wali Nasser on Iran grand strategy. It just came out last year. So since 1979, Iran has practically shown the world that it is its strategy is rooted in resistance to the West and to its outpost in the Middle East, which happens to be Israel. Um, if you look at all its defense posturing, its investment in militias across the Middle East, you will see these two factors um, glaringly. Defiance to the West and rivalry with Iran.
Yeah.
You look at Lebanon, the way Hezbollah was helped. You see, engagement with Hamas, the Houthis. So many a person would tell you that Ayatollah Khomeini was all about exporting the Shia revolution from 1979 onwards. But if you look at Iran's strategy, Iran has partnered with Sunni organizations more than Shia organizations. And if you look at if you look at Iran's uh, help to the Palestinian cause, you will get an answer to that question clearly. Like the legitimate struggle of the Palestinians against the Zionist entity is is not a sectarian struggle. All the Palestinians, most of them at least, are Sunnis. So Iran has gone out of the way, at least um, for a good part of 40 years, in helping uh, Palestinian resistance to mount a challenge against Israel and its henchmen. Um, and then one more important thing that the Trump administration and the Netanyahu-led government did not realize was the impact of the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq war. That took a toll on Iran, but it hardened the regime and the country in a manner that that people now Only now people have started to understand. Like 8 years militarily, Iran might not have won the war, but its ability to withstand foreign aggression all on its own. So foreign aggression as well as withstanding
Isolation.
foreign and doing it all in isolation. So these
Yeah.
two things really have played in fed in the psyche as well as the strategy of Iran. So I think the Trump administration and the Netanyahu-led government, the Zionist entity, did not understand that 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 Iran, there's a lot more to Iran than the Ayatollahs and all. And even if you talk about the so-called regime, I don't agree with this term regime, because if then I could call any other government a regime.
The Trump
If
regime, the
if
Netanyahu
you
regime.
look, yeah, the Modi regime, any
It's
regime. If you look at the educational backgrounds and credentials of the Iranian leadership, both the past and the present, and if you compare if you compare those with those of the Trump administration as well as the Zionist entity, there's a marked difference. They're trained in theology, they're trained in philosophy, they're trained in the art of war. They have the recently. Recently, the martyred Dr. Ali Larijani, he had a PhD in philosophy on Immanuel Kant. Um,
yeah, Immanuel
so
Kant.
Iran has produced some scholar soldiers, if you were to put it in a very simplistic term, in simplistic way, and they are rooted in both Islamic heritage as well as the rich history and civilizational values of Persia. So I
Mm-hmm.
think if you have this kind of a leadership, then using it automatically means that whatever the government is in power, it is likely to withstand and be more resilient. I think this is what the Trump administration did not understand, and even if they did, they were, we have this great misconception about um, brute force or superiority in numbers translating into coercive success. There's
Mm-hmm.
a plethora of literature out there, and we can have another program on that, which negates the idea that brute force generates coercive success or creates the coercive effect on weaker, so to speak, adversaries. So I
Yeah,
think
and so
a
so Ali, I just
combination of all this.
yeah, I just want to interrupt you there. Speaking of this exact point, that brute force leads to victory, or can compel an enemy, and especially a weaker enemy even, to abide by your demands, or to concede. We saw exactly the opposite when it came to Iran. We saw immense brute force. I think some of the heaviest bombings since the Second World War took place on the first few days of this conflict. And the expectation was, and in fact, the calls from Trump and from Netanyahu were for the Iranian people to stand up and throw away this regime. The decapitating attacks where they took out so many layers of Iranian leadership, not least the supreme leader, Khamenei. So, despite that, we saw the opposite happening. The street in Iran started, coalescing behind the state and behind the Iranian, whether you want to call it the government regime, whatever you want to call it, but really the Iranian system there, because I think there was that nationalistic spirit that I think was completely miscalculated. And another point that we're seeing right now, Ali, is uh, that the previous protests were also manufactured by Mossad. Apparently, that seems to be the reasoning coming out, and not saying that there aren't human rights violations taking place in Iran, but there was a lot of violence that was fomented by Mossad, and the expectation was that Mossad would be able to topple the regime after these attacks.
So let's focus on the expectations part, because I'm glad you brought this up, because that is where miscalculations actually come in.
Mhm.
The expectations were so simplistic that we'll go. People are waiting for us. They want to be freed from the clutches of the repressive Islamic regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and in Washington, Raza Pelvi was waiting in the wings to
The
take the
crown prince in
plane.
waiting.
Yeah, the crown prince in waiting was waiting near the Dallas airport, probably to take a flight to Tehran. The assumption was that, okay, we'll bomb Iran, people will come on the streets, people will topple the government, and that's it. And, oh, now we have taken out the 87-year-old Khamenei. It's game over for the Iranians. Little did they know that the people who have replaced Khamenei and Dr. Larijani are hardcore warriors of the Iran-Iraq war. Let me give you an interesting anecdote. Like, a very famous battle took place in the Iran-Iraq war, to recapture a very important Iranian city of Khurramshahr. And in
Yeah.
that battle, Mustafa Khamenei, who was then 15, took part.
Wow.
So all of these, the supreme leader is a war veteran. The current, the successor of Larijani, um, Zolgar, General Zolgar, is a veteran of the Iran-Iraq war. We have many other people. So so yes, so the expectation was that people will come on the streets and topple the government, topple the regime. People have come on the streets, but they have come under what we call the rally around the flag effect. They are they are they're quite angry, and rightly so, with how the attacks have been conducted by Iran, and sorry, by the U.S. and Israel. So you talk about liberating women, liberating Irani women, and then in the same breath you carry out an attack which kills 170 Iranian school girls. So
Mhm.
there could be people could have grievances. I have a number of grievances with our dispensation and all, but having grievances with the government, or a particular party in power, is one thing, and loving the country is quite another. So this distinction, I think they mistook genuine grievances of the Iranians toward the regime as hatred toward Iran. The Iranians are a proud people, and they
Yeah.
have a rich history and civilization, and they love their country to bits, like any other people would do in other parts of the world. So I think
Absolutely.
this was a very, very big miscalculation. Let's be very frank, nobody would support entities who are bombing your schools, colleges, hospitals, public parks, libraries. Um, so this it's quite simple. I don't find anything complicated in this, and this understanding should have, for all the um, you know intra administration uh, think tanks and all those you know networks of knowledge. The understanding about and on Iran has proved to be quite limited.
Absolutely.
And this,
And
and we'll talk about brute force and all, but understanding Iran's relentless recalcitrance to foreign rule and foreign aggression was also missing.
yeah, Ali, I wanted to touch upon the point. You mentioned that, nobody would want their own homeland to be bombed, regardless of their vote. I think one of the reasons for the lack of appeal of Pahlavi, the crown, the prince who never was, um,
Yes.
it was because he was all for these attacks. He was all for the bombings and the killings, and it seems now that this Iranian diaspora, the monarchists and the Iranians outside of Iran, who have all been calling for this. Like we have actresses, Nazanin
Yeah.
Boniadi, and so many people of the Iranian diaspora, academics, whatnot, who had called for, we need to take out the war, and they were jumping with joy when Khamenei was, assassinated in that attack. And yet now we see them realizing that when you make a deal with the devil, the war that you've ordered is now going not according to their plans. What do you make of this? And does this really affect, whatever type of new dispensation that could come play that was expected to come in place, the lack of popularity of Pahlavi?
Okay, so one thing should be made crystal clear here. Um, None of us is trying to argue in favor of the Islamic Republic or the regime, or none of us is actually trying to condone some kinds and types of human rights violations that the regime perpetrates.
Hmm.
But this war is something entirely different.
Yeah.
Regime change, this you have a very very strong background in international law, and you can speak to this more authoritatively. But the very idea of if somebody is unacceptable, we'll take him out is very dangerous. The norm that it can create is going to be disastrous for a world which is already in disarray. Um, so only the people of Iran have the legitimate right to remove or to topple a regime. Yep. Only the people of
Yeah.
Pakistan have the right to do that in Pakistan, or for all peoples.
Yeah.
Um, if somebody from outside comes and tries to foist um, an acceptable leadership, that means that somebody is not your friend or well-wisher. Uh, that somebody is out there to to create a dispensation or a country that will do its bidding. So
Hmm.
I think the people of Iran, in my opinion, have understood that Raza Shah Pahlavi is not interested in saving valuable lives or saving the Iranian civilizational and historical heft. All he wants to do is to rule Iran. And he has made his job tougher by not even once condemning any act of aggression committed by Israel and or the US. In fact, he has been appreciating each and every instance of of violence by both the countries, by
And
both the
and
entities.
and commiserating when they would have losses, but not commiserating
Exactly.
when his
So
own
he
people.
he wrote a whole
Yeah.
thread commiserating with with the families of the with three American soldiers who lost their lives, but he did not utter a word for those innocent girls who were school-going girls that were killed in a U.S. bomb in the outskirts of Tehran. So people can see through that. And so last year I wrote a couple of pieces in which the crux of my argument was that um, you can only talk to Iran if you give up this fantasy of regime change. You cannot talk to somebody whom you want to topple. So I cannot negotiate with you if I'm telling you that I will topple you, I will throw you out.
Mhm.
So you will not negotiate with me. Um, so I think Pahlavi misread the situation. Pahlavi does not know the pulse. He has not been to Iran since 1979. And interestingly, he's still not willing to uh, travel to Iran, to go to Iran. He says, and he's on record saying, you know, I might I might come and go. I will be mobile between Washington and Tehran because all my friends and family are in the US, and I've been living here for the past 45 years. So these were his words in the middle of the war. So and then he was pranked by a German, I think a German or a
I think it was the Russian, yeah, who acted as
Russian media
Germans. Yeah.
person. So I don't think he enjoys support. And believe you me, if, for example, this is a this is a matter of Iran's survival. Forget about the
Hmm.
regime for a while. So Pelvi could have varnished his credentials by saying, "Okay, the regime is in tatters. My people need me. All the more reason for me to be in Iran." And then let's see if there's a vacuum now. I should be going to Iran, especially Tehran, and leading my people who are ready to topple the regime. But
Yeah.
currently, he's sitting in Washington, giving interviews and having lavish lunches and
Yeah,
dinners.
Ali, frankly speaking, I think he's very clear on the fact that he does not enjoy any support on the ground in Iran. Very
And
minimal,
Trump
if
knows
at all.
and Trump knows that.
And Trump knows that, and I think they've already written him off. And I think us dedicating this much discussion to him is in fact a favor to him. Um, Ali, I wanted to ask you something. That look, we've seen the U.S. being embroiled in Iran, in Afghanistan for 2 decades, and they took out Afghan leadership, Taliban leadership again and again, and they would find replacements, and those people would be, those slots would be filled, and the leadership never really dissolved. So decapitation as a strategy has failed time and time again, right? There are very few instances where perhaps the cult of personality was so strong that taking out the leader eliminated the group or whatever have you. But now the Taliban weren't as sophisticated and weren't as structured as Iran is, right? How could they possibly have thought that a decapitation attack would have led to regime change? I mean, it's just like my 7-year-old son would have better sense than military planners in Israel and the US.
You have already answered by mentioning Afghanistan. They were in Afghanistan for a good 20 years,
Yeah,
and not that long. And they left Afghanistan not that long ago.
just
It's
been a
only
few
been
years.
4 years. 4 years,
Yeah.
right? So Vietnam is a distant memory for the Americans now. So the literature also on decapitation strikes being leading to some positive outcomes is against decapitation strikes. The Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka is is a glaring example of a, s- a successful decapitation strikes leading to um, the dormancy of a very virulent terrorist outfit or an
Mhm.
insurgent outfit. Otherwise, like if you if you want to take out the leadership, how many Taliban leaders were also taken out. Al Qaeda still, while it's tottering, it's still out there. But you cannot liken a country to a terrorist organization. The framing that the Americans and the Israelis have been contriving is is that Iran is a terrorist is not a country. It's a terrorist state, and the regime is the fulcrum of terrorism, uh, and that its violence is upheld by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So if you have that mindset, if that is your frame of reference, then these kinds and types of mistakes are not surprising. Your vantage point is you look they the US thought of Iran as a terrorist organization or the regime as a terrorist organization. They did not understand that the regime has multiple layers that provide it with depth, um, um, and resilience to withstand exactly the kind of um, wars, the kinds of wars that that are currently being waged on Iran, and everything is out in the open. Iran has been preparing for this kind of a war for the last 3 decades. Iran's the current strategy that it has adopted in terms of targeting, is should also have not been surprising. Iran has time and again told the world that this is how we will respond. So they should have understood that if a war is imposed on Iran, there will be serious repercussions. And I think no country is a pushover. And expecting the other side has no agency. This is exactly what India tried to do. India till now believes and has created a narrative, which, and I've written about it a number of times, this narrative that we can enter and exit a crisis on our own terms. So this actually means that India is denying Pakistan any agency. And if you do that to a country that is armed with nuclear weapons and a very strong conventional army, you're inviting trouble. When there are two parties involved in a conflict, you can one party cannot expect that the other party will do nothing.
Yeah, I
So
think
I think
in US military terms, it said it's something. It goes like the enemy gets a vote, right? That
the enemy.
despite
So
your planning.
yeah, so all these things exactly, and I'm glad you brought it up. And this point was brought up by this point was actually tied to the idea of strategic empathy. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was America's then Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara
Hmm.
who said that the enemy gets a vote, and you need
Yeah,
to put yourself in the shoes of the enemy and then take decisions which can change the course of history, and can be a difference between life and death. So
absolutely,
this
absolutely.
they should have understood.
Yeah,
Like
Ali, I'm really
you,
glad you brought
yeah.
strategy because strategy is what I wanted to move on next. We've discussed regime change, and I think that is clearly categorically off the table now. Right, this is not a strategic goal that the Americans or the Israelis, despite all their hopes and plans, this is not something they can realistically pursue at the moment. Having said that, the goalposts have been shifting for the Americans. They had wanted, regime change, and then they had wanted to obliterate all the nuclear material, enrich uranium, take out Iran's ability to use missiles against, regional allies. They've made up, the Diego Garcia story that Iran's missiles can go really far. And now there's further reasons to destroy that. Sorry. What do you make of this change in strategy, and where do you think what is U.S. strategy now, especially since Trump's discussion that where we're going towards a ceasefire?
Okay, so actually, when do you change goalposts? You change goalposts when you've not achieved the primary objectives and primary goals. So the
Or when
primary
you can't
objective,
achieve it anymore? Yeah.
exactly, or you have given up on those.
Mm.
So you change the goalpost. Oh, we have done this, we have done that. You try to create narrative, face saving narratives, as we call it in our field. You create face savers, you create face saving narratives that okay, regime change did not happen. In your mind, regime change has not happened. So we destroyed their navy. Oh, now we have obliterated their air force. Iran does not even have an
Mhm.
air force,
Yeah.
so to speak. So change. The point here is that if after 26 days of incessant bombardments by two nuclear armed countries, negotiations are about to happen, or there are chances that negotiations could happen, is nothing but a big win for Iran, because they went out with a mission of obliterating, of destroying Iran and the regime and even the country. Mind
Hmm.
you, time and again, both Netanyahu especially has said that we want to destroy Iran. They've not even said that we want to change the regime. They've said we want to destroy Iran because Iran is the source of all evil. And Trump not even today, not even during this war. He has, like, since years for years he has been saying that I will destroy Iran,
Yeah.
and there are tweets to back my claims. Um, so the goalpost has been changing because Trump wants a way out. Just 2 days ago, he said the goal is to the goal is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the conflict, the war started. So this tells you that the fact that Iran has survived and retaliated continuously for the past 26 days, um, has has really upset all the plans that the U.S. or Israel had before the start of the operations, and now both Trump especially wants a way out. And then you will obviously change your goalposts for domestic audiences, and you will create a narrative that you can tie in with the situation that's evolved,
Yeah.
so that there is less public backlash. Uh, so this is why these goalposts are changing, and
Hmm.
I find it. Um, I find Iran's current rejection or refusal or denial of negotiations um, very smart in this context, because Iran is currently, it has established a chokehold through the Strait of Hormuz, and that chokehold is causing a lot of ruckus and mayhem in the world. The US is not, you know, and I'm surprised that the US did not anticipate this.
I think we all are.
It did not anticipate this. So
Hmm.
now Trump is seeking help. Every day he says something very different about the Strait of Hormuz. Uh, on the one hand, he says that he wants help in um, in having it open, and on the other hand, he says that the strait will open on its own. And then yesterday he was saying that Iran has sent us as a big gift. So he wants a way out, but he wants a way out in a manner that saves some face, that gives him some face saving. But
Obviously.
I don't think that is in the offing, because strikes as we speak continue. Iran has rejected the idea of having direct or indirect talks with the Trump administration, and we can talk subsequently the
Yeah.
demands that the US has put on the table, and then the counter demands of Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ali, I wanted to discuss that. We know that Iran has always been a country with multiple power centers. It's never been, just the president or just the prime minister's office. It's always been, the IRGC, and it's been a bunch of others. So could it be that the Americans are speaking to one entity, which is, amenable to some sort of negotiated settlement? But at the same time, we now have a severe hardening within the Iranian regime, where Mujtaba Khamenei and then his people, in within the IRGC, within the national security setup, they are opposed to any such immediate cessation, because it seems like it, and I know we've discussed this before, I mean earlier as well, where you said that Iran seems to be having the upper hand, right? If the Americans and the Israelis especially are, on the ropes at the moment, with low interceptors, seeing direct attacks on places like Dimona, which one would expect to be the most
Yeah,
heavily
secure.
secured location in Iran. So where do you think, what is the negotiation strategy or the bargaining position that Iran is trying to build for itself?
Okay, so there are a couple of things to note here. The US, Iran, the US, and some European powers signed the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in 2015.
Yeah.
Um, until the first Trump administration withdrew from the agreement in 2018, Iran was fully compliant.
Yeah.
Um, with the terms of the agreement. I'm not saying this. You're not saying this. The IAEA, which was the guarantor of the agreement as well as of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, it was IAEA that said that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Iran, that the JCPOA was hurt not because of Iran, not because of Iran's lack of compliance with the terms of the agreement, but because of things that were not part of the agreement, like ballistic missiles and proxies and all that.
Yeah.
So, despite the animosity between Iran and the US, the JCPOA was agreed to, and that effectively got the nuclear issue off the table. So that was a great thing. But then the withdrawal took place, and that was a serious breach of trust. Then there were many rounds of negotiations, but the last two rounds of negotiations were quite noteworthy in the sense that during both those rounds, Iran was attacked by Israel and the US.
Mm-hmm.
Now, rebuilding trust when all of this has happened is a gargantuan task. It is an
Absolutely.
uphill task. It can't happen overnight, and Iran has every reason to doubt and to be skeptical about all kinds and types of proposals that the US may. Uh, Israel does not offer does not offer any olive branches. Israel is very clear it wants to destroy Iran because let's be very clear, Iran is currently the only obstacle to Project Greater Israel.
Yeah.
So we have to be very clear. This is why I believe in that the vices of the regime can be kept aside for a while, can be set aside for a while, and we should see this war as one in which a Muslim country on its own is fighting against Zionism, a Zionist entity that is, intoxicated by power and this idea that we can, you know, kill people and carry out genocide at will. So we need to see this war in this perspective. Um, and so your argument about the decision making setup and all, they were moderates. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was a moderate. You
Mm.
talked about the disinformation campaign regarding missile strikes in Diego Garcia. Um, the Ayatollah was on, went on TV and categorically ordered the scientific community in Iran to ensure that missile ranges do not exceed 2000.
Yeah.
2000. So he was a moderate. Uh, Dr. Ali Larejani was a moderate who, according to many scholars, was the one who could link politics, strategy, and security and come up with diplomatic solutions. Now you've killed both of them. What do you expect? Yeah, hardliners, obviously, even if I'm not a hardliner, and if I see all of this happening, I will become a hardliner. I would not like, and I would never trust you if you've ditched me thrice in a span
Yeah.
of 10 years, and twice in less than a year. You've ditched me twice uh, in less than a year. So I would be very, very cautious, and I would take this very gingerly going forward. But because of the military resistance that Iran has offered, and
Mm-hmm.
because the US and Israel are, so to speak, on the ropes, Iran is trying to wait it out. So Iran has received 15, the 15 demand document, um, which is again a regurgitation of of all previous demands that you will not have ballistic missiles. You need to, end your support for Hezbollah. Um, you should completely abolish your nuclear program, which is again, Iran is part of the NPT. Iran has every right to have a civilian nuclear program. So it's a wish list that favors Israel. Iran has now
And under from a international law perspective, it's an unlawful these are unlawful demands, right? You can't
exactly,
require a state to give up its lawful rights, right, under
exactly,
international law.
and
Whether that's related to nuclear weapons or whether that's related to missile technology or whatever it is, I mean, this just becomes too much, and especially when one party is giving this up and the other party isn't. This is not a reciprocal exchange.
exactly. So, uh, uh, absolutely, I think the last point that it's not a reciprocal exchange is very important here. So you have a bevy of of U.S. military bases around Iran. You have Israel, and you then expect, and you've attacked Iran twice in less than a year, and then you expect Iran, and you've made every effort to destroy Iran's par, the military capabilities of Iranian partners throughout the Middle East.
Yeah.
Now you're expecting that Iran should remain in this hostile environment without ballistic missiles. That's unfair, and that's something that's not happening. But yes, as you said, ballistic missiles are needed for a reason. If you need to establish some kind of trust, then maybe you could start addressing those reasons as to why Iran retains those ballistic missiles and drones and all those things. Because again, going back to coercion and how compellence is difficult to achieve. One of the principal reasons as to why countries, even if they are weak, um, resist agreeing or succumbing to the demands of the aggressor or of a more powerful country is because they feel that if we forego one thing, the canvas will increase and more demands will be made, and we will if we agree to one thing, we'll have to agree to others, and it will be a big reputational damage. So if
Yeah.
I can't stand firm on one thing that I value, then the aggressor, who is a behemoth, he will ensure that he will take more away from me than I
Yeah.
can afford. So here's the thing. So we need to look at this. Okay, the JCPOA put a cap on enrichment to 3.67%. Okay, then you breached the JCPOA by unilaterally withdrawing from it despite Iran's compliance.
Which was simply an Israeli demand. There was absolutely
Exactly.
no,
Right.
that behind it, reason behind it,
Exactly.
or logical
And
framework behind it.
this is I think this is a very important point because Trump's entire criticism regarding JCPOA of JCPOA or on JCPOA was based on two things: the presence of the Iranian ballistic missile arsenal and Iran's proxies. And both of these things irk Israel more than the US. So,
Yeah.
yes, that's perfect. And Israel was very unhappy when the JCPOA was signed, and Netanyahu, who has long desired to hit Iran, was very very much against the agreement.
Yeah.
So now this is why Iran has said um, that if any substantive negotiations will have to if if for substantive negotiations to take place, the US needs to remove its military bases. It needs to give us war reparations. It also needs to help establish a code of conduct on the Strait of Hormuz, through which Iran gets its fair share in lieu of fee and all. Um,
Hmm.
and then the sanctions should be lifted. So Iran has positioned itself to demand to raise the price tag because of its military resistance so far. And I don't think Iran. It is in the interest of Iran to back down from the to come a notch down from this position at this stage,
Yeah.
because um, the other sides want the other side one side, because Israel does not want a deal cracked. If one of the warring parties is um, desperate for a deal, then the other side would it would be prudent on part of the other side uh, to wait it out and to put more substantive things on the table,
And be able to
which
extract more from the
challenge.
deal, right?
Yep.
Um, Ali, there's one question that I wanted to, really focus on, and that is Netanyahu, right? Netanyahu's goal for the last several decades has been, you know, eliminating the Iranian regime, neutering them, essentially neutralizing their ability to conduct any sort of offensive capability. If what we're seeing right now, that Iran might get sanctions lifted off it, it might have to, renegotiate or give up its ambitions for a nuclear program, though they have clearly stated that they don't have any such ambitions. But but they still retain missile technology. Will this not mean a very severe defeat for Israel? Because if after having gotten what they've always wanted, this massive attack by the US being on their side, and they've still failed to accomplish their objectives. Is there a future for Netanyahu? Is there any ability for them to be able to, later on coerce Iran into some change in ways?
I think Netanyahu is already on a very weak wicket. Th- this is this this is perhaps the reason why this whole uh, s- October 7, 2023 carnage and the subsequent um, genocide 4.0 has happened. So this will be disastrous for him. Um, but I don't see, I don't foresee any change in Israeli policy regardless of who is in power.
Hmm.
Because unfortunately, like I was giving an example to somebody in the morning about how good friends, how good relations we have with our Indian counterparts when we go for conferences and track through dialogues and all. Uh,
Hmm.
we have a lot of complaints, right? Complaints from the Indian leadership and its policy and all. But at the people to people level, we have good ties, and everyone shows a lot of compassion when it comes to that. But unfortunately, the society, the leadership in Israel is a reflection of what the society in Israel is, unfortunately. And when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Palestine, West Bank, all occupied territories, and Iran, every Israeli is the same because they want to wipe these people off the face of the earth. So Netanyahu might go.
Well, I mean,
Or
the vast majority, we clearly see the polling, that they're in favor of
yeah,
this war. We see the genocide that they've been in favor of the programs in Gaza, the vast majority. So not all. I mean, there are people
yeah,
who are opposing it in
yeah.
Israel.
Of course. As for the success or lack thereof, the fact that this 26-day war and count these 26 days have clearly shown that when a state cannot achieve its war objectives,
Yeah.
it loses, and Israel has not been able to achieve anything. Replacing Khamenei with a much younger and much more energetic Khamenei
Uh,
is not a
and a
victory.
lot more hawkish
A
family.
lot more hawkish, and
Yeah.
hawkish made by he has been made hawkish by circumstances. He lost
Exactly.
his father, he lost his son, I guess. I think his
His
wife
wife
is
as well.
mother is seriously injured, but why he lost his wife, and I think he also suffered injuries. So if if any of this happens to me, I will become hawkish too. So that's
Absolutely.
so replacing a Khamenei with a much younger and a much more hawkish
Hmm.
Khamenei is no victory. Replacing Larijani with another IRGC trained commander is no victory. And then giving the IRGC, the Paspane Inqilab, it has gained much more space in the Irani polity since the war started,
Yeah.
and this space is not going to is not it will only IRGC will only increase space for itself going forward, and we can see the statements that come out from the IRGC are much more firm than what, for example, the president says. The president is still a restraining force. You remember, he uh, spoke to, he made a statement apologizing, so to speak, when it came to attacking Gulf countries
Hmm.
or the military assets of the US in the Gulf countries. So, by deliberately targeting voices that were moderate, Israel and the US have made um, both finding and taking off ramps exceedingly difficult.
Yeah.
And
And
I fully buy this market stabilization theory when it comes to every Israeli Israeli infested outlet is pushing news which says that which say okay, negotiations are progressing very well, and we can have a breakthrough. And also, one has to be very careful because this
absolutely.
might turn out to be a ruse, because the military mobilization in the Middle East um, is signaling something very sinister,
Yeah.
which is the potential start of a ground invasion.
And I think that's one of the biggest concerns here, that a ground invasion is going to be a meat grinder. It's going to be a lot of souls lost on both sides, I think.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and when you have American soldiers on the ground defending them, you're willing to take a lot more leeway in terms of killing civilians and targets in Iran.
Exactly, and to what end? Again, going back to coercion, can can a can 10,000 or 10,000 or so US soldiers coerce Iran into doing something that the US wants it to do? I
What
don't think
about
so.
what about taking over of Kharga Island? Where 90% of Iranian oil is shipped from. Could that become, a bargaining chip that enhances, say, Trump's position or the U.S. position in negotiations?
Um, is it going to be that easy?
No.
I don't think it's going to be that easy.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think it's a marginal increase in bargaining position and a loss
yeah,
of
the
potentially
risk
thousands
is
of
too high.
American lives. Yeah,
The risk is
absolutely.
too high, and the IRGC is not just Iran has two armed forces. The IRGC is one, and then you have others, the regular armed forces. And then there are people who are willing to fight for their country.
Yeah.
How
And not just in Iran, across
Not just in
the
Iran,
yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
And we thought that Hezbollah had been devastated since 2023, but Hezbollah is pretty much in the picture. It is fighting, and unfortunately, what's happening in Lebanon with there's a lot of carnage going on there. People are not really focusing on that. So Hezbollah is still a veritable hurdle in Israeli plans.
Yeah.
Also, we cannot discount the possibility of the involvement of the Houthis
Mm.
in Yemen, and that could again be another debilitating thing for the US. Um, and for oil supplies going forward. So
Absolutely.
I think there are no good options that the US has on the table,
Hmm.
uh, and even the the best of the worst option, even that is not available. In my opinion, there is no option uh, unless some credible, sincere, confidence building measures are taken. We are in it for a long haul, unfortunately.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah,
and
this was going to be my final question to you. How do you think this ends? And if your answer is that we're in here for the long haul, potentially, that is deeply concerning. What about Pakistanis who are excited about hosting the Iranians and the Americans? What are your words for them?
you know, um Pakistan's only role in this conflict should be that of facilitator and a mediator if it comes to that. So if so the fact that we have offered our good offices is a good thing. We
Hmm.
should be partners in peace rather than being partners in war. I think so far we have managed the situation well. As for people who get excited, I don't want to get into that because that excitement has many sources and many reasons, and I don't want to get into those. But so far Pakistan has navigated this intricate crisis in a very decent manner, and I hope we stay put and continue to offer our good offices to
Absolutely.
partners. We need to be very careful because these negotiations, I believe, and I just tweeted a while back, are a non-starter given because there's a yawning gap between the demands that the Americans have put on the table and those that Iran has put on the table. And the Iranian embassy in Islamabad has tweeted just a while back that we don't trust the US. The Iranian ambassador also said we don't that Iran does not trust the US, and we've already talked about the reasons as to why there's absolutely no trust between the two countries. So
Absolutely.
we need, but one more thing, we lose nothing technically um, if it works out, which is highly unlikely. We will get a lot of our stature will increase uh, at the international level. We have done this in the past. Uh, we were the one who brought China and the US together. So it will have that effect, but will it solve Pakistan's very many crises? No, these things don't do that. But it will give our narrative a great push that we are all for regional stability and peace, which is also very important.
Absolutely. Ali, we could have discussed this for many, many hours, but I recognize that, you have, you're a busy man, the things that we both have to do. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for this week.